So we're looking at learning outcome 4 now. So we're almost at the end. We've got today and tomorrow, then we'll have looked at all of the learning outcomes. So learning outcome 4 is understand common barriers to communication and how they are overcome. 4.1 is explain how communication barriers caused by the sender of a message in oral, written, and non-verbal form can be overcome. And then 4.2 is explain how communication barriers caused by the receiver of a message can be overcome. So let's get into the slides. So just to start off with, as a bit of an intro on these, we're just going to look at what barriers to communication are. So to have effective communication, we should really have an ideal situation, but normally that doesn't happen. So barriers to these can be language, noise, so just even your background, the setting that you're in, so noise just as in noise, or even you getting your message to a person, that can be noise as well, from the distraction that's in the middle. Distractions, your phone, depending on where you're working, you might have someone knocking on the door, you might have children running around, you might have something else on your mind. So what sort of distractions? Any put downs, lack of interest, disabilities, discomfort with what the actual topic is. So if you're not comfortable speaking about a particular thing, you're not going to want to pay attention to it. Distance, that can be physical distance, or it can also be if you're, interruptions within that. So if you're working from home and you're trying to listen to something and you get an audio interruption. People asking too many questions, which it might pull you off topic. Other people, and depending on what they're doing, if someone's fidgeting, you might just focus on them. And what time you have, you might be stuck for time, so you're like, oh, hurry up, and you're just really eager to get out. And then barriers, so like language, so if you've got employees in different countries and they speak different languages, like now working from home is a major thing. I mean, it wasn't like this a couple of years ago, but it's been really developed. So you've got a bigger talent pool, but you've got people who are available to work for your company. That might be in Thailand, they might be in India, they might be in Africa. So depending on what language somebody speaks, that could be an issue. Again, too many questions. It's to be honest, we don't even really need to go through every single point on this. It just really goes through.
It's pretty straightforward.
Exactly. So 4.1 is to explain how communication barriers caused by the sender of a message in oral, written, or non-verbal form can be overcome. Now, the person who actually sends the message, it can be you, it can be management, so whoever is actually talking or sending a message at that moment. When we want transparent conversation, we need it to be fluid, we need it to be understandable. So it's one of the keys to a successful organization, so that what you say flows and what you're actually trying to convey is understood to the person. Sometimes messages can be confusing, they can lack efficiency, and it can be due to communication barriers. I mean, for example, if you send a message out today, you'll think, oh, I shall know what's going on, I'll just send her this. But if you don't put all the information down, say if you're asking me something with the assignment, but you don't tell me what question you're asking about, then that'll be confusing with me, and then I'll send it back to saying I'm not understanding what you're talking about. So it's very important to be clear. So there are barriers to effective internal communication, and these can be defined as, the problem that happens between the sender and the receiver of the message. It can be happening because the dialogue is distorted or unclear. It can be happening because there's a lot of misunderstandings. If you're not hearing something, somebody might have a hearing issue, or they just might not really pay attention or zone out, and then you've spoken to them, they said, yeah, I understood, but then they've gone off and they don't really know what's happened. So they've not got that message very clearly. So the barriers to an efficient internal communication are classified in two types. So there's internal factors and external factors. So internal factors are caused when you've not got something to do with clarity, obtuse or confusing information. So you know what you're trying to do, it's set in your mind, but it's not coming out as clearly as you want it to. So it's misrepresented, or you've got the wrong choice of method or the wrong choice of words. You might have said something really wordy and really informative, but you've done it over the phone. You might have spoken so fast that that person hasn't had a chance to note things down, or they've not felt comfortable asking you to repeat yourself. So instead of doing it over the phone, it could have been done in a different method. So it really depends on what sort of things you use. So external factors are like noise, distortion. Like in my lesson this morning, my captain reconnecting, my students couldn't hear my voice for some of the sessions. So I was repeating myself over and over. So that was noise and distortion and the connectivity issues all in one go. Depending on what environment you're in, and then also depending on your understanding, do you actually understand these jargon or this terminology? Do you need to get it cleared up? So how can these actually be overcome? So you've got to make sure that you use the correct type of delivery. So make sure that you're presenting your information in the correct way. So if you're going to do letters, emails, or conferences, choose the method that you need. If you're going to do a verbal presentation and you've got people that may speak a different language, have a translator there. Have someone there that can maybe sit with them. I remember when a time where I was working in a primary school a good number of years ago, and we had a lot of parents that were Urdu speaking. So instead of me standing up at the stage, there was translating and speaking over the main speaker at that time, which was the head teacher. I went and sat with that group of parents, and I actually just explained to them in a quiet tone exactly what she was saying. I translated for them. So even having someone off to one side, sitting with the person you need to focus on can help. Then, do you need to do a presentation? Do you need to go on to a webinar or do a conference via Zoom or Teams or Join Me? So choose what the correct type of delivery is and stick with that. And then also give people time to understand and write things down and ask, do you understand? Is this okay? So make sure that your audience understands. So I'm constantly asking even with you, when we're doing lessons, I'll be like, Conrad, have you got any questions or do you understand? Or with my students early this morning, I said, is there any questions you have or would you like me to clarify anything? So just choosing what you say will help you to understand if your audience knows what you're saying or not. It's important to keep the information short or depending if you're talking verbally, but then you can make it complex if you're doing it in a different form, like in a presentation or an email or a letter. So an example of this could be a specialist will be able to decipher industry specialist words, so your terminology, but don't expect the apprentice that has just joined the company to be able to understand the same type of terminology. Now, if you come and start telling me about all these new terms or things, jargons that are used in the business world, I may or may not understand them. I might have a concept of certain things, but it's not necessary that I'll know everything. But if there's somebody who's been within the industry for a very long time, they'll probably have a bigger understanding of these things and be able to keep up a lot easier. So again, it all boils down to you adapting how you talk, what you're saying for each person. Then we've got external factors, like today, this morning, I had internet connection was an issue. So if you've got a really big meeting coming on, it's common sense to do a test run. I remember that I've, to do with CPD, I remember joining some webinars to, just to do a bit more training. And before that, I'd get an email just to do a connectivity test to see what how strong my signal was. And I think that's a fantastic idea. So send out a link first, check everyone's connectivity, and then you can actually troubleshoot any potential problems that have been caused. So before the meeting, someone can say to you, I've got bad audio, and you can try and go and fix that rather than wasting time in the actual meeting itself. So you can just have that hour, get your meeting done, instead of having 2 hours and spend 30, 45 minutes trying to focus everything on everyone and then flunder about. make sure you log on a few minutes early and get everybody to do the same to test the connectivity on that day. And again, it helps time wastage. And then speak clearly and explain any unfamiliar words. Even if it might seem silly, sometimes say the word and then say, oh, this means, or just say the explanation. And be in a nice, quiet area, especially if it's a very important meeting. For informal things, I don't think it really matters about you being in too much of a quiet area, but for formal situations, you should be. Then body language, if you're in a face-to-face situation, then keep an open and relaxed pose. Do eye contact. I mean, all of these things, from how we talked yesterday, you do them anyway. You've got a very high understanding of how to adapt your language, how to speak to others, what sort of medium to be using. So I think you'll be, yeah. So that's 4.1. Do you want to go over anything, or are you okay with these points?
No, I'm okay. They're pretty straightforward.
They are, aren't they? And then 4.2, explain how communication barriers caused by the receiver of a message can be overcome. So the receiver is the person that's got it, and it depends on what they're up to at that moment, to be honest. So here are some points that might stop the receiver from getting the message. So you've sent me a message. Maybe I've got a bit of issues going on, or maybe I've got some barriers that are stopping me understanding what you said. So it could be because I've got poor listening. I might not have an interest about a topic, or, I might just not be, I might be distracted with other things that are going on. It might be because you've got lack of relevant information. So if you've sent a message and the person who's received it doesn't have access to, say, Excel, or they don't have access to a PowerPoint, they can't open your documents or your attachments, they're not really going to get hold of what you're talking about. So, or they're not really going to understand what you're saying if all the information isn't there. Inattentive. So if they're being inattentive and they're just focusing on the phone, or they're doodling, or they're eating their lunch at the time they get the message, they're not going to pay attention. Now, this especially happens when there's a new idea, a new concept. Sometimes you can look at something and you're like, oh, what's that? So you've got to really be able to make sure that you're paying attention when you receive a message. Time. So it's important that both the sender and the receiver actually put down time to exchange information and to give feedback. So if you rushed for time and you're trying to belt out a 5-minute email, which you know is going to take you 5 minutes, but you've only got 2 minutes to do it, you need to wait and put down time to it when you can do it. Lack of language proficiency. So it might be because they don't understand certain things, or it might be poorly explained, so it'll be misunderstood and confusing. And then interpretation of words, this can lead to confusion. So an example of this is the government has agreed to bail out the company. But what does bailout actually mean? So it means providing financial aid, but it might not get interpreted by the receiver in the same way. So they might understand that it's bail means that they've left the company, they've just run off and just let the, said, right, you're done. Or so they might understand that they've actually left them to their own devices, they left them to fail. But instead of understanding, actually, no, they're meaning bail out, that they're actually helping them, that they're giving them financial aid. So it really depends on what you understand in certain words. So they can lead to miscommunication. Then bypassed instructions. So bypassing can happen if the sender and receiver actually look at the message in different words and different meanings. So if you've sent something meaning one thing, but the person who's received it actually understood something else, that'll mean that what you're trying to get done won't get done. And then basic things like if you're overconfident, or if you're underconfident, or if you're not quite sure of what happens. And then again, you just don't want to work together. You don't want to collaborate. You don't want to put an effort in. You don't have that right attitude towards working. Never mind, Saki, I can't be bothered with this. So it'll happen when it happens. That type of attitude can also have, people not understand what's going on or what the message means. And then denotations and connotations. Now, words have two types of meaning. So words like table, book, account, and meeting are denotative by nature, and connotative meaning, on the other hand, means qualitative judgments. So, you got, for an example, so cheap. So the supplier supplied us with cheap items this time. So if I look at that, I'm thinking, oh, they gave us crappy items. They're not a good quality. They're cheap. But then I might have the same word again, and I think many sales have cheap sale items. And in that way, I'm happy because I'm getting something at a good discount. So it really depends on how you feel about certain words and what your reactions are and what your judgments are to certain things. So those were the barriers, and there's just a couple more slides on how to overcome these communication barriers. So just make sure you set aside time. Have time management techniques, put down a notebook, have a calendar, make sure you list the most important tasks that can't be delegated to another day to be done that day, and anything that doesn't get done at the bottom list can actually be followed on to the day after. So make sure you set yourself up. Try and be flexible when you're trying to meet targets. So work with the management, set realistic times, make sure that everything is getting followed in the way that it needs to be done. So if there's something, if I come in and ask you and say, Conrad, I need your assignment by tomorrow evening, you'll say that's not doable. I can't do it by tomorrow evening because I've got family, I've got other commitments. And you say, right, I won't do it by then. I'll give it to you in a week and a half. And I'll be like, okay, let's work together in that way. So have a conversation and liaise with the sender. So if I've sent you a message which was really confusing and you don't know what I've said or you've not understood, get in touch with me and say, I'm not 100% sure on these terms. Can you clarify? Can you give me more information? Reduce noise level. So if you're distracted, if it's really noisy, colleagues are having a good old chat, try and work in a quiet area or ask them to move on to the staff room instead. So pay attention and know any key points of information. So highlight them, underline them, bullet point them, make sure that you're getting the key info on. Listen actively, so actually pay attention using your body language, your eye contact and so on. And then also give constructive feedback for future interactions. If I send you an email and I thought, oh, I've done a fantastic job in this email, I've explained everything I need you to Conrad. But you can come back to me and say that, please clarify the information. And also for future reference, I didn't quite understand what the meaning of this paragraph was or what you meant in this sentence over here. So then I know for future-wise, I can fix what I've said and that I won't do the same mistake again. And then is there anything that you can think of that might help to reduce communication barriers?
To be very fluent, try to be fluent, very audible, try to make eye contact with the person, and sometimes use gestures to explain what you're trying to explain to the person. Sometimes you can even write that, or sometimes I can even give examples or demonstrate what I'm meaning, or point the person towards the right direction.
100% exactly. Especially examples that really help to point out exactly what you're trying to say, because it just sets a scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that was just 4.1 and 4.2. So it's quite a nice, simple one. It's something that we've more or less touched upon in the past few days anyway, at the moment. So communication barriers, what communication barriers are caused by a sender and what communication barriers are caused by a receiver of a message.